Shellbacks is one of the reasons I like the Shellbacks is obviously the people, the topics that they talk about, but most of all, it's the level of knowledge right in the room. And it's most of you have so much more knowledge about sailing than I do because you've owned your own keel boats. I have never owned a keel boat, and I've always been either a co-skipper or a sharer of some sort. And I didn't know quite what to talk about, but my previous presentations have been my trips or bareboating or so on. But today I thought maybe I will share with you some of the boats I've been on. And if you'd like to think, count in your fingers how many of them you've been on or how many of them you know, it should be fun. So let's go down here. These are cut down from about 25 or so to about 20. And these are my ancient boats. And we're going to start out with my most important boat ever, I think, as far as the thing goes. Before that, this is my first certification. Charles R. Hope is granted rating of helmsman in accordance with the rules and bylaws of the club and is authorized to take charge of any craft owned by the club, including the classes named hereunder, to navigate in open waters by day and by night, and to race such craft under similar circumstances, conditions. Class 30 square meter. The boat we're going to talk about is one of the most fantastic boats ever, the Sherry 30 square meter. Back in the old days, to race a boat, you had to have a crew. And then some folks in Sweden said, whoa, that doesn't seem fair. And the Swedish Yacht Club started the meter design class, 30 meters, 22 meters, 40 meters, and so on. So basically, you're looking at here, 100-year-old Swedish design. And I still think it's one of the most beautiful yachts ever. This is what I learned to sail on in Kiel in Germany. And it was revised, the rating was revised in about 1925. It's 29 feet long and about just under 6 feet wide. It's probably the wettest boat I've ever sailed on. But it was exciting in those days when I was a teenager, I guess. What I liked about it was that I learned on this course in Kiel how to dock it without a motor and how to do man overboard drills. Later on, these two skills became extremely useful. But I don't know how many of you have ever sailed on a meter class, but they are really magnificent. And this is the start of the Volks boat, start of the shark class, shark of everything. Up until this boat came out, everybody had to have a crew. Now, for the first time in the world, people could race their own boats. That's why this is important. Oh, I came out of the army, and there's a guy called L.R. Coles who my family knew, and they got me a sail with him. This is the boat I sailed on, his Nicholson 36 in the Solent. Those of you who know Allard, well, he's, I guess, a publisher and writer. He was a wonderful guy. And I came out of the army at the age of 20, knowing you all, have my little certificate. And we were going down the Hamble, I guess, to the Solent. And then there was a crack, and the main dropped. And I was looking at my co-crew, who was a 40-year-old guy, shooting up the mast. And I heard in the background, Chris. I turned around, and as soon as Allard had eye contact, he says, go down the gangway, second drawer on the right, pick out the 2-inch shackle and hand it to Bob. So I went down, came back. By the time I got the shackle, Bob was down the mast with the halyard, the shackle on. He came back and I helped him hoist the main, and we were on our way. Everything took less than 5 minutes. The lessons I learned here is that if you don't have eye contact with the person you're talking to, don't yell, lower your voice. It was interesting. The other interesting thing on that particular trip was he's a competitive sailor, I guess, and we were leading the fleet out of Cowes to the windward mark, and the tide had changed. And at the windward mark, the tide had gone up to about 6 knots, and we were in the lead, parallel or right with the windward mark, and we're there for probably about 2 minutes in all. But everybody who saw us there tacked. All the people behind us tacked. Allard was hoping for a gust or something to get round it. He didn't. He then tacked and we came 7th. I guess when you're competitive, you've got to push the edge. In this case, he didn't win. But his boat was super. My next in the Solent, there's a class called the folk boat. And this was a knockoff of it. It's a clinker built folk boat. And we had an awful lot of fun in the 60s, sailing it across to France on the long weekends in races, going down to the Channel Islands and so on. Again, the skipper was a friend of mine, Hugh, and I was most of his crew. But we'll get to Cherbourg maybe. And the 2 women on board who looked like drowned rats on the way across were retired and all had a nap. When we went out for supper that night, they came up looking like $1 million, and myself and Hugh looked like drowned rats. But it's whatever it was. We went down. Next day, we will come out of Cherbourg and catch the ordinary race. This is a current that runs down to the Channel Islands at about 6 knots. A lot of fun. But have lunch there, then head back to England. I said, I really like that boat. As I say, anyway, it is a predecessor to the Shark. It is a 24-footer. It is one of the lead boats. Here we have our Shark. I sailed them from 65 to 68 at the RCYC. My first skipper won everything on Thursday nights. Could never beat on the weekends Dakin at Port Credit Yacht Club. Those of you who remember him, he was a fantastic sailor. I think his boat was Little Red Jacket or something. I know he had a sense of humor too. The great thing about the Shark was we could sleep aboard. It was nice. It's a boat I always enjoy watching when I do the timing on Thursday nights. It's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful value for money boat. Oh, what do we have here? Nonsuch. Yeah, I've got a friend at the National who owns a 30-foot Nonsuch. What I like about that is the headroom. It's absolutely fantastic. It's very simple to sail, and it's solid. One of, I guess, Canada's best designed boats for the elderly couple of people who are retired. Fantastic boat. Canada's had some really good boats. Here we have a, what in the heck is this? Quick, somebody. Oh, of course you're not. Here we go. Bayfield 32C. What I liked about that is that it was one of the last commercially produced boats with a full keel. Everybody else had gone to the Spade and so on. And this had a lot of headroom and very user-friendly, sea-friendly, and so on. A friend of mine at the Island Yacht Club owned it, and it's fun. Hello. How many of you sailed in the North Channel? Probably everybody. One of the greatest cruising grounds in the world. No tides, lots of interesting harbors and all sorts of stuff. And this is the boat I chartered up there. Very user-friendly for myself, my wife, and my 2 daughters. Again, a good Canadian design. We never win a race, but boy, it was a wonderful boat for a holiday. I really enjoyed sailing that one. Owen 34. I did a course with the American Sailing Association one time, and this is what I sailed on. I really liked it. So next year I came down with Mary and the two daughters, and we took it down to the Keys. When you're sailing in the Keys, it's pretty shallow. You can always see the bottom. In fact, it's only about a foot below your keel. But again, 34-footer was an ideal family boat in every possible way. We loved it and had a really great trip. Let's move on. These are the boats of choice, obviously. This is Benettos and Geno's. I've got the Geno in the next picture. When chartering, with just myself and my wife, this is the boat we liked, simply because it had many, many really useful features. The power windlass, so you just touched your toe on a button and up came the anchor. Small things like that. It's so well designed inside. It's for coastal cruising. It's absolutely perfect. This is the bigger one, the Geno 45. It's the biggest boat I ever chartered. Oh, no, not quite. Correction, probably yes. I'm kind of thinking, I did charter a catamaran in Belize at one time, which is maybe a 50-foot catamaran. So yeah, but see, this is the biggest monohull I've ever chartered. And it was a super boat and it really went fast. We sailed down from St. Martin's to St. Kitts, all around that area and back again. It was just wonderful. Again, if you ever get a chance to charter a Geno or Benetto, fun. What do we have here? Oh, okay, that was my coastal sailing, most of it looked after. We're now looking at my first transatlantic trading. And these are little certificates they gave you in those days. We went from Lunenburg to St. John's, from St. John's to Falmouth. And then I did it from Bermuda to Lunenburg. Then I did some races, Gran Canaria to St. Lucia, Antigua to Bermuda and past it. All this is recent stuff. Oh, me in Egypt. I guess we're moving on to part 2 now, which is great. I'm a scuba diver, scuba dived on both sides of the Red Sea recently. And we were in Egypt, and this is what I wanted to visit. This ship is, what, 4,000 years old, give or take, 4,500. It's the oldest boat or ship that you will ever see, 144 sweep. And it's interned, or was interned, alongside the Great Pyramid. It is breathtaking. There's oars you see there, and were made more for stabilization, I think, because it was designed specifically to go to the sun with the Pharaoh. So it's a sky ship. Move on. Again, the prow was interesting, and the boats and so on. And back. What is really interesting is it came in just over 1,200 pieces, which they had to put together like a crossword puzzle, more or less. But this, I think, without fear of contradiction, that is probably the oldest boat you will ever see. I found it absolutely fascinating. Okay, how did they hide it for 4,000 years plus? Those slabs of stone are 16 tons. And they were pits like this on all sides of the pyramid. Others were empty. This one held the boat. It was hermetically sealed, so not only was it dust-proof and air-proof and so on, it was totally waterproof. And it was down deep enough and covered with enough stuff that it wouldn't easily catch the eye. The architectural people who found it in the 60s, I guess, was totally amazing. And the bits of the boat were in that hole there as such. And they got them out and they put them together. This is one of the great archaeological finds, I think, in Egypt. It's just incredible. I guess we're moving on to Norway. That is a replica, by the way. It's not a genuine one, but it's what the tourists go for sails in. This is the museum of the Viking boats. I'd been there when I was in the army back in the 50s, I guess. And also I took my wife there when I had an opportunity before she passed on. The Vikings were incredible boat builders, beyond belief. And this boat is about 900, about from the 900. Look at that prow. And notice the boat is, as per my Spartan, is clinker built. The beauty of it is, again, totally breathtaking. It's very exciting stuff when you're seeing, you know, these genuine boats dug up from the mud and so on like that. Incredible. Don't miss it if you go to Oslo. Now we're moving forward to the 17th century. We're back in Sweden now. We know we started out with that 30 square meter. Well, back in the 1600s, there's a boat builder who was building a boat for the king. And he said, the king said to the boat builder, the Danes have another layer of guns. Put another layer of guns on my boat. And the boat builder said, sire, I don't think, what did you say? And the boat builder paused and said, right away, sir. And when his 135-foot hull and so on, added another layer of guns. Now, in those days, I guess if you disobeyed the king, you had your head chopped off or something. So whatever it was, the result was amazing. 1.6 kilometers from its launch, a gust of wind caught the boat and it capsized. A brand new boat of the line. Went into the mud and it was then dug out, reconstructed. To get these boards and things, get salt out of them, they sprayed them with water for fresh water for about 10 years. I want to draw your attention to the row of guns at the bottom and the other row above. You don't add another row of guns on a hull design for one row. It simply makes it top heavy, as you know. But going to the museum, my wife wasn't that interested, and she had a book to read or something. I said, I can do a museum in half an hour, so I'll be right out. At the end of half an hour, I said, I need another hour. The fantastic museum in Sweden, Stockholm, don't miss it. This is one of the treasures of the world. This was the first museum to actually get into digging up boats and things like that. Give you some idea of the size, look at the people down the left-hand side. The work that went into this reconstruction mostly, or whatever it was incredible. We're back in the 17th century. But let's now move, oops, wrong way. Push the other button, see what happens. Oh, we're now in the 16th century. Why I have a special attachment to the Mary Rose. After my wife passed on, I was on the internet and dated a woman in Vancouver called, what the hell was her name, Glorianne. My idea's claim to fame was that when she was in England at the age of 19, she was working on a Viking site in Scotland somewhere. She saw an ad in the newspaper saying, wanted marine archaeologist. So as a chippy 19-year-old Canadian, she applied. She had never scuba dived in her life, but she had the archaeology experience. So they put her through a course, and for 3 years, she spent off and on under the water, blowing away the silt from the Mary Rose. Why this is also interesting, later on when I did the Fastnet, I saw the marker buoy that marked the Mary Rose. So I've been right over the site where King Henry VIII's flagship was down. They managed to raise about half the show. So no, she's no longer a girlfriend. She moved on with somebody who was taller, handsomer, probably richer. Here we go. This is the Garrick type boats. This is not in Portsmouth where it sunk, but these are the boats at Dover preparing to go somewhere. You look at the number of guns and so on, and look at the detail and of the things. The British Navy was so far ahead of the Swedes at that time, it was unbelievable. The work that goes into making these boats is incredible. I think probably on the left here, top left is the flagship, but you'll see. We'll move on. This is a better picture. Yeah, here on the left you'll see is the Mary Rose. And again, if you look at the guns and so on, look at the way it's set up. And this is the same era as the one in Sweden as such. And what happened here was, it was built in the early, I guess, 1600s. It was a working boat for over 30 years. It was re-rigged in about, 4035. And it went down to, whatever it was, 14, let's go back a bit. 15, sorry. It was re-rigged in 1535 and it sank in 1545 in the Solent. Why did it sink? We will never know. A Frenchman claimed to have sunk it, but I think probably they've just capsized. The museum, they learned from the Swedes, and again, this wood was underwater for over 10 years. This is half of the boat they managed to bring up. And again, it was an incredible feat. And the museum is totally enclosed, air conditioned and so on. And you can see everything you need to see there. Do you see the TV screens on the upper deck there? They have the screens there showing what the people did on that deck, which I again found interesting. And this is from the other end as such. You walk around it and so on. And what bringing this boat up was it changed the way people looked at history in the 1600s. Because all the plates and all the living utensils were intact. And it's just a totally, I mean, it's like a time warp. If you're in Portsmouth, don't miss it. Victory. I went round the Victory, I guess, when I was about 16 years old. And I went again. But why I'm showing it to you is Victory's on the left and Mary Rose is straight ahead. So it's all in the same area of Portsmouth. This is what this looked like. So in the 1600s or so, or if it was 1800s, I wouldn't like to face the broadside of that. This is a boat that Nelson was on at Trafalgar, the actual boat. What's fascinating about this is about 10 years before Trafalgar, they got a new guy into the Admiralty. And he apparently didn't know one thing from another and was scorned, but they stuck him involved with provisioning. Whatever it was, the Lord of Aberdeen. And he looked through the records and he changed all the provisioning. So the First Lords of the Admiralty were absolutely furious. They said, you no longer putting molasses on board. No, we've got the contracts for molasses. It's a staple of the British Navy. He said, I'm sorry, I just looked at the results. The boats that carried oranges, lemons, cabbage, and green stuff and whatnot had no scurvy. The boats that carried molasses lost about 25% of their crew to scurvy on a 1-year trip. A 2-year trip, they'd lose 50% of the crew. I don't know what I'm doing, but I've changed the provisionings in order to stop the Navy killing people. They were furious. How dare you do that? We've had contracts in writing and so on. They said, well, what do you want me to do? Anyway, End result was 10 years before Trafalgar, the whole British Navy moved over to these plants and stuff that they ate, which didn't involve, stop them getting scurvy. It was totally amazing. So at Trafalgar, they had men on Victory who had 10 years experience in firing guns and getting the boat to turn and so on. So part of the win was due to the fact of the diet of the fishermen, of the sailors. I found again, that's extremely interesting point. Let's move on a little bit. Yeah, Cutty's Ark. First time I saw that was probably again about 16 or so. It's at Greenwich in London. There's lots of really good, interesting museums in Greenwich. And if you go to London, you must spend a day there. It's incredible. This is one of the most beautiful clipper class boats ever built. Incredible. But where the Victory had about 800 crew, this had a crew of 28. Big difference. Again, this is again at Greenwich again. Also some very good marine museums there. That's probably another time. It's amazing. Every time I go to London, I always go to Greenwich. It's just one of those stops. Okay, the 28 crew on board, and you're going about. Good luck. Ah, back in Canada. Blue Nose, until I actually saw it, I thought it was just a boondoggle, an over-expensive tourist attraction. Once you've seen the replica or the rebuilt, it's one of the most beautiful boats you'll ever see. Incredible. But I'm really pleased that it's part of Canada. This is a guy who skippered it in the early days. It used to be used to bring the cod catch in to Lunenburg. It has a record of having the largest cod catch ever. And it also has a record of winning every international sailing race except one. And this is the chap who did it. Angus, wherever it is, Walters. Let's go. He had a stamp dedicated to him. I hadn't known too much about him. But not only was he a working skipper who could bring in cod, catch and bring cod, but he also was a very good racing skipper. That's a more modern, that's the new version. Washington's axe, if you replace the handle and replace the axe head, is it still Washington's axe, the one he cut down the cherry tree with? The Blue Nose, after its fishing days, was a cargo boat, and then it was reconstructed to become a Blue Nose 2, and then it was reconstructed to become Blue Nose 3. Interesting thing, becoming Blue Nose 3, the requirements for boats in commercial boats had changed, and they made the builders put on a steel rudder. Well, the structure of the boat meant that the steel rudder was really 100% solid, but very difficult to turn. In fact, you couldn't really turn the boat around very easily. So when I was there, I was talking to one of the people on the committee. He said, well, what we've had to do is replace the steel rudder with a wooden one like the original, and nobody's saying anything about it. So if you actually go down to Lunenburg and walk onto this boat, you'll know that you can ask, does it have a steel rudder or a wooden one? And they'll tell you. This is the boat up close, as I was there in 2016. Pay attention to the finish. I'm proud to be a Canadian with this boat. People spend more on bricks and mortar museums, but this is a good way to spend money. Really incredible. The finish on the boat, it has a full-time crew, by the way, or whatever it is. So again, the upkeep on it was absolutely better. I think one of the boatswains or something showed us around. Totally amazing. It's a work of art. Don't miss it when you're in Lunenburg. Part 3, I guess. We're going on to the slightly more modern boats now. We've done a bit of the history. Racing Ventures, the Challenger, the Whitbread, that's a Volvo 60. So try and look at the keel, it's blotted out by the caption. It's a 13-foot keel or such, and a lump of lead on the bottom. But this is a state-of-the-art boat about 60 feet long, give or take. That's me sailing. You can't sail that boat without having a smile on your face. It's just a wonderful, wonderful sensation. Buzz. Okay, this is we're preparing it to go across the Atlantic here, actually. What's interesting, the person on the right, skipper, like Allard Cole, she's one of the best skippers I've ever come across, very seldom raised his voice. We're just getting it prepared. Oh, this is interesting. I don't know how many of you have been on these high-tech boats, but it was an eye-opener for me. Totally beyond anything I'd done in my life. On the right, on the starboard side, these are the jams, and on the port side, they have the equal number. So you roughly have about 18 jams. Now, you see that thing saying fractional spin halyard? One of the things, on my trip across the Atlantic, just outside, going from St. Piers round to St. John's, I was steering the boat. It was dark. I had a big spinnaker, it was only sail on. I had this pole star on my left, I had Orion's belt on my right. The moon was rising up. I think the crew were down below making coffee or something. And I had 2 dolphins swimming alongside me. Moments like that, I find very, very, very exciting. The next watch, I was coming off watch. It was pouring with rain, 4-foot waves. It was miserable. The next day, a couple of days later, I was on watch. I don't think I was steering, and suddenly there was a bang. Yeah, that's the sound of a halyard. It wasn't the main halyard, it was the staysail halyard. So up the skipper and says, "What's up?" And you takes a look. He goes up to the bow in 4 to 6 foot waves, breaking over and so on, and said, "Release the fractional spinnaker halyard." Now it's dark and trying to find it. Luckily, I'd memorized that lot. I would remember it now. So you pull back that fractional halyard, he loosened it from the mast, added it to the staysail. He said, "Raise the fractional spinnaker halyard." We whipped it around the thing and raised it up. And within 5 minutes, we were sailing again. Now remember, we weren't racing. We were just cruising, a gentle cruise. But it's awfully nice being with a skipper. There's Jim Hatton, who mentioned that very exciting talk we had I found very exciting talk we had last week about not having 100% faith in your skipper, or your arms with somebody who knew what they were doing. And it's very, very exciting when something goes wrong and he puts it right and you keep going. Again, on the same trip, I was dozing at 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought it was about 3 o'clock. And suddenly there was a bang, bang. Yeah, that's the sound of hitting a whale. I don't know if you've done it, but when you've done it, you'll know it. Poor whale is dozing on the surface. We ricocheted off the side of him, I get. The skipper had 4 pages of close print to fill out to report that thing. And one morning coming up again, this is 7 o'clock, I came up dozy hour, and dolphins left of me, dolphins ahead of me, dolphins behind me, dolphins to the right of me. The skipper said, "Come down, Chris." We looked through the holes in the hull, that we could check the keel, and there were dolphins below us. The boat is made of Kevlar. It's like a sound box. And you know when somebody drops a harness on the boat, no one can sleep. But you could hear the dolphins talking to each other. So that was a lot of stuff on this boat. Okay, to go about, you had to put a reef in, go about, then take the reef out. And if you saw a cloud, maybe 20 minutes ahead, you put a reef in just in case. And when you, after taking the reef out, this is what the deck looked like. So all this had to be wound up and so on. Again, it's a different kind of sailing on a boat like this size. And I was very lucky to discover the Spartan. Let's go. Oh, here we are. We're now in the Grand Canaries. I don't know how many of you have been there, but it's reputed to have the best temperature in the world. It's 25 degrees more or less the year round. I'm on the left, by the way. That was probably the crew that was there more or less. Welcome to Grand Canaries. That's lots of boats. I took a hop on, hop on. Oh, well, that's our boat. I'm on a hop on, hop off bus. That's the commercial side. It has good restaurants, has good everything. Now, this is the north side where I stayed, the tourist side. My hotel is on my back, and there's a long promenade, and look at the blue skies, the beautiful beach on the left, and so on. And this is where people go, they walk up and down. A number of the crew that I was on have come back here for holidays. It's just such a great place to go. This is looking the other way, and so on. This is Turkey. This is the tourist side. Oh yeah, I guess when you're going across the Atlantic with about 10 crew or so, give or take, you need food. So what the skipper does, he has his little book. He tears it into 3 bits, where his list of provisions, and I think there were 3 of us. Each couple had a list, and we went out and filled these boxes. We were required to buy everything on the list and buy anything else we wanted. And it was put into these boxes. And again, this is geared for yachts. The store would take the boxes to your sailboat, and then you'd load it in from there. How much did it cost to provision a boat to cross the Atlantic? Somebody put it on their credit card. It was $1,600 US. That was, again, unlimited spending, pretty well. I thought that was reasonable myself. Anyway.
It is.
Okay, we left land. I wonder if I'm in that picture. Sometimes I am, sometimes I don't. Yeah. Definitely not in that one. I'm just taking the picture. By the way, this is typical of the horizons when you cross the Atlantic. It makes you so invigorated. The whole point of ocean racing or crossing oceans is the rhythm of the sea. You get into it, and you just become happy. Melody Schaefer, we all know from the RCYC. She's probably the best female helmsman I've ever met in my life. Incredible woman. Me. Nobody really likes doing the log, so I had to volunteer to it. I leave them to do the winches and such. Oh, if you look in the over my shoulders, my bunk, the little khaki thing, on the top left-hand side is a list of my watch. Skipper, me, Becky, Melody, and Simon. And the other watches had been blocked out. But this is not everybody likes doing the log in a boat that's tossing around. Guess no wind. This chappie took morning sights, noon sights, evening sights, and so on. I did. How many of you in Shellbacks have done the course on celestial navigation? I don't know, but I did it. I passed it on land with a sextant. I got within the requisite 3 miles, nautical miles of my position, or GPS position. Well, this chappie, I don't think ever was able to make the calculations to find out where he was, but he did religiously take sextant shots. Ah, Melody again. I guess that's coming to St. Lucia. Ah, spinnakers. It's a 90-foot mast, and the spinnaker is obviously huge and always causes interest. I may be on the bottom left-hand side there. Look at that horizon. Don't miss it. It's absolutely gorgeous. Don't ever volunteer to use the coffee grinder. I got worn out in about 30 seconds when you're putting up these huge sails and something. Just volunteer for anything else. Melody again. Beautiful horizon. Ah, nap time. On my right there, you see my coffee mug, my water, and the watches are 3 hours on, 3 hours off. By the time you get out of your gear, and get back into your gear, you have about 2 hours on the bunk maybe. And I'm right by the navigation station, so nobody ever stops talking. So the amount of naps you get is marginal. It's obviously, if we're heading west, it's the morning sun. Hitchhiker, that's flying fish. Oh, I guess we're in St. Lucia there. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of us. And the skipper took the picture. Yeah. Okay, next race. I'm just looking at the watch here. Okay, Antigua to Bermuda. This was a year later. There we go. I put this picture in because it's one of the first sharpest pictures of a crew I've had. Somebody must have actually taken it with a proper camera. That's me on the left-hand side, by the way. It's on the right is Simon, and the female on the bottom is his wife, and Melody top left. Hamming it up for the camera. I guess we'll, I think we only had about 8 of us on board that time. So I guess I'm in the picture. Wow. Okay. This is very, very interesting. On my first trip, I said to the skipper, why are we filling up these bottles, 10-gallon bottles or whatever they'll call them, with water when we have a perfectly good water maker on board? He looked at me and said, Chris, say you're halfway across the Atlantic and the water maker breaks down, what are you going to do? I paused. He said, I am not, this boat is not set for winning races, it's set for getting raw crew from one end of the Atlantic to the other. So this is the number of boats that we use to go from, I guess, Antigua to Bermuda, over 20 of them, 10-gallon jugs. By the way, when you were in Grand Canary, the water there is from a desalination plant. It doesn't taste that great, just as a tip, but this water was fine. So, but again, there's certain things I'm finding at a tender age of 80, whatever it was, difficulty lifting these heavy things. Oh, always somebody in the bosun's chair mending something. And that's, I guess, when we got to where we were going, Bermuda. Why am I still in my outfit? I was always cold. Where are we getting there from? Where did that come from? All right. This is, I guess, going to Bermuda. That's right. That's right. I'm not giving myself along. Nap time. Very similar to us, not similar at all. Call it a slave ship. There's not much space between the bunks. On the first trip, we had luxury. We had a 1-burner stove, which means that you cook the rice or the noodles or whatever, your potatoes first, and then you put another pot on with the sauce or the soup or whatever it was you added to the rice. So by now the boat had progressed. We had 2 burners. So this was total luxury. But imagine, yeah, all right, crossing the Atlantic with just 2 burners. That's what it's normally like. That's why you're usually hooked in. Me dozing. Okay, here's the spinnaker business again. If you look through in the top left-hand corner, it's my bunker. You can see it through there. I was in one of the forward ones. Yep. There's a big chappy. In heaven, as usual. Okay, wrapping it up now with my fastest race. My dream come true, getting in the Fastnet. This is the beginning of the race. You see all the orange sails? I don't know how many of you have done this race, but it's a really something I've been looking forward to all my life. You see me cheering in the background. Each sail there has a number on, and you put the sail on and you motor past the committee. They are checking up on certain things. You line up on deck, and they want to make sure everybody's got life jackets and so on. It doesn't account for people you hide down below, but by and large, they will have a list of the number of crew, and they will count the number of crew that have life jackets. So that's us about to sail past the committee boat. The boats ahead of us have just gone past. You've got, at this juncture, about 2 to 3 hours before the race, about 400 boats milling around. It's pay attention time. Okay, it was 2 hours before the race or so, and we had the sail had just come back from the sailmakers, and we had to put it on the mast. It took us probably an hour and a half to do that. It's a heavy sucker. Yep, getting there. Big sigh of relief when we're actually getting it up. While we're getting the sail on, this chap passed me in about 8 knots of wind. Do you remember the days when the catamarans had foils? Well, the monohulls now have foils. My sailboat of choice is my windsurfer. It has a foil. And as of this year, it no longer has a sail. There's a thing called a wing you hold above your head. So again, I'm on the state-of-the-art sailor on a windsurfer on a foil. And here in Solent was the generation, the previous generation, when you had we had 2 hulls on your sail. You may have guessed, this is just after the start, with 400 boats heading out to the Fastnet Rock. Challenger is marked there, and we were there. Now, I had to spend my time biting my tongue, but I was trying to explain to the skipper that in the Solent, the currents are vital, and it might have been a better idea to have been further north. But again, I had to take into consideration we probably didn't have a racing crew, top level people, so we put it down there, and of course, the whole fleet went on ahead of us. You have to be a bit careful in Solent. If you're out of the current. I know once going round the Isle of Wight, I cut in and I missed the current, and I ended up by going last. So I've been there, done that. I know the area quite well. But it's interesting. There's a 400 boats plus there, and that's what the start of the Fastnet race looks like. Oh, what happened? We've gone back to the beginning. Oh, there we go. What's happening? I've got a backup, by the way, in case of, oh, okay, I guess I'm using a 10-year-old computer. We all know what happened last week with that one that old. So I have a backup ready. Heading into the RC, I guess. Something that had to be adjusted on the main. Broke a back halyard, backside stay, usual stuff. We shredded our main that night. Things happen when you're pushing a boat to its maximum. This is how you're normally sailing. This is with a reef main, probably 20 knots of wind and so on. And we're all hooked in. If you're not hooked in the boat, you'll be thrown right over. And so you have to be hooked in. Waves breaking over the Irish Sea, of course. No, I didn't volunteer for that. You have to be really tough to work that thing. That's Melody's daughter. She's at becoming a doctor in London, England, med school. Melody, notice how the boat's tipped. I think she's making a toasted cheese sandwich or something along those lines. I'm on the right-hand side doing the log. Again, boat's tipped over. The safety lines are taut and everything. That's a good picture. I guess that's when we get to where we were going, round the. And this is the last slide of this thing. Because we shredded main and whatnot, we didn't do that well in the race. Well, we're coming into Plymouth and everyone in Shellback knows the Eddystone light. So let's have a chorus. No, don't. So I'll get rid of this, I hope. Oh, get rid of that. Leave me, no. I'm trying to get back on the screen again. Can you folks see me?
Yes.
Okay, I can't see you at the moment. Leave meeting, nope.
So are you finished with your presentation?
My presentation's over. Yeah, I'm just trying to sort things out here.
Okay, so what I can do is we'll go on to questions, but I just want to show something first.
Okay, I'm finished today. Yeah.
Okay. So on the screen, this is how you can raise your hand. You click on, you look behind the Zoom toolbar, click on participants, and then you can click on raise hands, and we'll take you in order so we don't have a lot of people on trying to talk at the same time. So that's the way that if you can do that by clicking on participants, clicking on raise hand, I will call you on order. And when you're called on, please unmute yourself. So are there anybody want to ask a question?
I hope not, but everybody in the club knows more about these boats than I do. So,
yeah. So if you want to ask a question, click, follow the process to click, raise your hand.
Good.
Elspeth, could you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Maybe we can deal with the questions when we meet at the club in January.
Well, I'm not sure. Go ahead, Elspeth.
It isn't actually a question, Christopher. It's just to say I agree about the Vasa. I did see it in Sweden and it's amazing.
Oh, I'm so glad you enjoyed it.
It really was quite something, and I'm not a museum person, but it was amazing.
Yeah, it's breathtaking. I'm so glad you enjoyed it as well. I do hope other people have done so, yeah.
Okay, anybody else has a comment or question?
How do I get my hand?
Chris, you don't seem to ever had any big waves. I'll bet you had big waves sometime.
We had, and crossing the Atlantic every now and again, you got, I never was in a major storm, no. I've crossed the Atlantic twice, once one way, once the other way, and most of the time the winds were benign. It was only when we caught the end of the hurricane on my first trip that we had the 2 to 4 meter waves, but that was only for a short time anyway. So basically, with the modern technology, you've got all the weather maps and you work around the storm areas. So there should be no reason for hitting a big wave when you're going transatlantic, going on a transatlantic trip.
Okay. So in future, please raise your hand first before you're recognized so we can make sure everybody gets a chance. Diane, go ahead.
Okay, I have to unmute.
No, you're unmuted.
Okay, good. Chris, I was just wondering how, what happens with personalities when you've got people so close together like that? You have so much food on board, you have so much water on board, so many sails and lines. How do you navigate that? And do problems arise and how do you solve them?
It's very interesting. Sorry, that's a very good question because you had left out one feature. You're totally exhausted.
Oh,
3 hours on, by the time you get out of your gear, get into bed, then they wake you up, you have to get back into your gear, try and we got one head, it was trying to rush to get there. And the idea is you must be on deck before your watch starts. You can't leave people on deck when they're tired. The tension is you're fighting yourself for tiredness the whole time. And the people who submit to this sort of transatlantic stuff are wonderful, wonderful people. They're people who can deal with tiredness and deal with the problems without losing their temper. It's totally amazing. And basically, one of the reasons I sail or I climb mountains, go canoeing stuff, is not so much for the activities, it's for the people I'm with. One of the reasons I come to Shellbacks, it's not so much the topics, it's for the people I'm with. And when you get involved in transatlantic stuff, it's with the people you're with. You never know who you're talking to. I was chatting to, going across to England, some guy about Everest. And I said that I've been let down by a company in New York. He said, well, why don't you use my Sherpa? So he gave the name of somebody. What happened in New York was my cost of my Everest trip had gone from 7,000 to 15,000. They wanted a doctor because of my age to go with me. I said, no, we have a contract. They didn't recognize the contract, so I canceled out. So I used this guy's Sherpa, and for $1,300, I got to base camp Everest. So you talk to people, and you find that you have similar interests. It's interesting. So coming back to the fact that when you're tired, you're worn out, the skipper very seldom raised his voice. The whole idea on a sailboat is, unless you have eye contact, you don't raise your voice. There's no point. The person won't hear you. So again, everybody went beyond what they had to do. We tried to get on deck early, so that what should come off. People did food and stuff. Imagine cooking in a boat that's jumping up and down and stuff like that. It's difficult. So again, it's you've all heard Melody in the Shellback. She's a wonderful example. She's done the clipper races around the world, 2 of them, I guess. But there again, you're facing really tough conditions, really worn out. You're absolutely exhausted. You go up on the helm, and then you got to take your helm whether you like it or not, for 20 minutes and so on. You're with wonderful people.
So in other words, there has to be some knowledge of the people who are coming on board, some clear vet,
You're paying for your berth and you're there.
So the skipper doesn't vet you before?
No, he just has to fill the boat.
Wow. But so
I'd never be allowed on a racing boat to cross the Atlantic. Come on.
but what you're saying though is that the skipper must establish a relationship with you when they first meet you, and have a gut feel that you're going to be the kind of person who would do the sort of things you're saying, and sets an amazing example.
Well, he usually has two mates.
Okay.
Quite often, sometimes he didn't. He took one watch and one mate took another. So there's always a couple of people who are highly competent. And again, all your responsibility was to hook in.
Right.
You had to hook in.
Right.
I don't know when I told you about that. Crossing to England, I was coming off watch and I heard him say, he was hooking the people in as they came out of the cabin. Remember, if you fall overboard, take your life jacket off. You'll die quicker. At 3 o'clock in the morning, overcast, pouring with rain, a 6-foot swell, there's no way I can find you. So again, the
Wow.
only responsibility is to hook in. And it's interesting, one time a boat hit a cross wave, and somebody who was hooked in went from one side right across the railings on the other side. If you hadn't been hooked in, you'd have been overboard. Because a bang like that on the boat can get you. My skipper will deny saying that to anybody, but I'll have witnesses. No, basically, with a group of people, you don't get along with everybody, so you only have to get along with your watch, really, and 5 other people maybe, and they depend on you and you depend on them. But remember that everybody is doing more than their share.
Yeah.
If you're having trouble tailing a winch or something, somebody will give you a hand, or whatever you're doing, there's always somebody there who will help out.
Right.
It's a seamanship or teammanship.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And also there's a rhythm of the ocean. You get into a rhythm of peacefulness. And it's absolutely incredible. It's beyond belief. It's something very exciting. I'm glad to have been able to share it with this group. Many of them know it anyway.
Yeah.
Is there anybody else who has any questions or comments? Please raise your hand.
Okay. Chris, I would just like to say thank you so much.